This is your skipper, Christopher, and I'll be taking you on an adventure in building a Jungle Cruise entrance sign. To increase the enjoyment and survival of those advertisements, please remain seated and enjoy this 3-hour tutorial. Here's my drawing all laid out. I used a projector, I opened up my eyes, I saw the sign, and then I traced it. And what's nice about this is I can use it as a guide. So the first thing I'm going to start on are these two side pieces. Everything I'm going to be using on this project is all scraps I have lying around the house. I got this common block of wood here. It's popular. So now I'm going to rip this down to 2x2 and then cut it into two pieces at 6 1/4 long. Now I have these wee little blocks here. I'm going to cut a 3/4 by 3/4 notch on the back side of the block, and then I can have my fascia board with the logo on it attached from the back. After I rip these guys down, I'll cut them down to about 40 inches long. If I leave some of this rough cut on here and then I go back and paint the logo on it and then give it a light sand, it'll give me that worn look they have at the park. Now let's spruce things up by cutting the top and the bottom pieces from a 2x4. I'm going to be real careful and do several passes and rip these things down to about 1/2 inch thick. Alright, now so those are cut. Now the next thing to do is to give two of these a routed edge. It looks like they used a Roman OG router bit, so I'll get that. It also looks like they just routed the sides and the front, so I'll leave the back flat to help me square everything up. Now because these routed plates are the same width as the two outer plates, I need to rip them down to about 2 1/4. Be sure you use the wood glue and not the wouldn't glue. I'm just using a 1/4 inch crown stapler to shoot these together. Now to make the top curved part that says entrance on it, and for that I'm going to use this scrap 2x6, and then for the popped out trim I'll use this scrap cedar fence board. Now for this I'm going to use a jigsaw, but normally I can cut this just by looking at it. I saw it with my own eyes. I use this drum sander to straighten out my cuts with the jigsaw. I'm using this wire brush wheel on my grinder to create that cool raised wood grain look. Let's shoot the trim on with a finish nail gun. Alright, I got the top all shot together and I've got the grain all raised. Now the next thing to do is in the real sign there are carriage bolts. They're probably like 3/8 carriage bolts, 3 on this side, 3 on that side. And because I shrunk this thing down, I need smaller carriage bolts. Now I don't have any, but I do have a ton of these. So I'm gonna go ahead and just grind these down and make them look kind of like a hammered carriage bolt. Well, using those bolts was fascinating, but I screwed up on the length, so now I gotta cut them down. The other thing I'm going to do is I think I'm going to put a plate back here so it supports these 3 boards and keeps them from wobbling around. I just used a cutoff wheel to grind all those off. I just used a scrap piece that I had ripped from the 2x4 as my plate. So the last thing I did is I built these little shelves for the lights that I haven't made yet, and I got these tiny little corbels underneath. I just did that by using a Forstner bit through a piece of wood, and then I cut my little square out. And then I've attached it to this. The plan is I'm going to paint the whole thing first and then attach them. Alright, so I didn't show it, but I made this little daily tours sign. At Disneyland they have some little angle brackets that have the eye bolt coming out the top. So I'll see if I can find some longer ones. If not, these should work. So the next thing to do is to make these lights. Now, I was originally going to use some jelly jar lights like I did with the skull light pole that I made the other video for, but this is way smaller and I don't want to go too much wider than the shelves. These are like 3 1/4. This MDF is easy to work with, so I think I'm going to use this scrap piece of MDF. I have this old tool chest that I skinned some metal laminate on. I can just rip this off and then bend it and have it be the outside of the light fixture, so it gives it that metal look. Hey, that soap bottle's kind of shaped like a light. I have all these light fixture and lamp parts left over from when I did the skull Adventureland post, and I think I'm going to use some of these parts for this light fixture. When figuring out the size of these circles, it was easy as pie. Quick tip, if you ever need to start a fire, just use a dull hole saw. Now I lock my circles into place so I can route the edges with this 1/4 inch roundover bit. These bolts are like 2 inches too long, so I'm going to cut them down real quick. I remember the first time I bolted 2 things together with metal fasteners. It was a riveting experience. I just used adhesive to attach the rest of the pieces to the fixture. Even though I'm making circles, sometimes I gotta cut corners. The trick is to build this so it looks like the light fixtures that they have at Disneyland, while also making it to where it fits the size bottle that I have. After cutting the metal laminate to size and sanding all the sharp edges, I make a jig that'll hold it in place so that I can bend my corners by hammering it. I put a little Bondo on all the cracks and to kind of get rid of the wood texture on these little pieces I glued onto the back. It still needs a light sand, but while that's drying, I don't think Gina's gonna miss these bottles. Not only is this thing the right size, it's also white, which is cool because I was planning on frosting the glass, but it also has the rib texture too to the light fixture, which kind of helps make it match the one at Disneyland. So that's cool. So now I just need to cut the top and the bottom, slide it into place. You gotta be careful cutting these bottles. It can be a slippery soap. Be sure and give these guys a base coat. But if you guys are old primers, this is nothing new to you. For the spears, I have these 1/4-inch dowels, and then I've got some MDF that I ripped down to like 1.25 inches. The actual tips of the spears are only going to be about 6 inches, but I left myself a little extra so I could hang on to it while I'm carving it with the disc sander. I'm not super experienced in wood carving, but I know a whittle. It's a learning carve. Alright, got me some shanks going on here. So the next thing I gotta do is then I'm gonna draw a line and then start taking it down at an angle here. Kind of start sharpening this stuff. Because that's what you want. You want a bunch of sharp pointy knives like in your kid's bedroom. To get a more concave surface, I use a Dremel or a drill with a sanding drum, and I even it out with sanding it by hand. I was gonna say a joke about a blunt spear, but I don't see the point. Using my DeWalt drill and 3 different size drill bits, I'm going to do the step-up method in drilling these little spears so I can glue my wood dowels into place. I got to be very careful. I'm going to let that dry, and then I'll go back and clean this up with some sandpaper. 3D! Woo! Woo! Sorry guys, didn't mean to poke your eye almost. I primed the spear first, and then I did a light sand. Now I'm going over it with this metallic oil-based paint. Then once this dries, I can go through and add like a darker shade to give a little more dimension to the curvature. Wow, those look pretty sharp. Ooh, that looks super fun. Alright guys, last night Gina and I tried dyeing this raffia grass red. She actually dumped the whole thing of all natural red food coloring into the water. The other thing I did is I busted a red Sharpie and threw the whole Sharpie in there, and that's all it turned. So I'm thinking we either used too much water or it just ended up not dyeing it. Let's move to more drastic measures. Now I was gonna spray paint it, and then I was like, you know what, we have this red paint. Why don't I make a watered down version of this red paint in this bucket and then stick them in there? So that's gonna be what I try next. I'm gonna use this leftover rigid sculpture foam. It's either 2 or 4 pound. It's easy to work with and it doesn't melt with polyester resin. For this sculpture, I'm just using sanding blocks and different grit sandpapers. Man, sculpting a duck bust can be so difficult. You gotta get in all the quacks. You have to be very careful with pieces like this. They can quack under pressure. Alright guys, so you can see that I have the gist of it all done. And like, especially with a sculpture like this, I try to do as much as I can on the saws to just kind of cut most of my angles and get all my pieces. Now I'm going to go back through and be a little more careful with sandpaper, carving like the shapes. I've got to add some contour to the bone. I've got to do some rings for the eyes, shorten the beak up. Just make sure that everything looks good. Gina and I just always assumed it was Donald Duck, his head mounted to a surfboard-shaped shield. Don't forget to have a hole saw help you with the eyes. And now it's time to hard coat. And to figure out how much you need to mix, it's easy. You just have to stay within resin.
Hopefully that'll glue all the pieces together. If I need to put some fiberglass over it and stuff, I can do it, but I'm hoping that that'll give me enough of a hard candy shell. Now to make a shield, and I think these pieces of MDF will do nicely.
Getting jiggy with it. Nah.
I'm going to paint the spear handles with Gina's vinegar and steel wool mixture. We had some in the garage. I did a little test piece, and there it is right there. I'm going to go back in with some shading and kind of give this some black shadow to kind of give it a little more dimension.
I decided on just bondoing the back of this headdress here to cover up all those metal pieces and lock everything together. It's nothing flashy, but it fits the bill. After looking at pictures online, I couldn't tell how big his chin was, so I decided to shave it down a little bit, and I think it looks better. Now it's time to start painting. First, we're going to age the wood with a watered down black and brown paint mixture to make it look old. You're going to need a bigger brush. I cut another circle out with a hole saw so I could use it to mount the arrows to the back side of the duck head. I'm using Bondo to glue these two pieces together. I don't want to screw this up. Or do I? Anyone know why they don't play poker in the jungle? Too many cheetahs. Why don't they do math in the jungle? Because if they add 4 plus 4, they get 8. What do they call a polar bear in the jungle? Lost. Due to the lacquer of interest, I didn't film it, but I applied a clear coat over everything so it wouldn't varnish into thin air, for lack of a better word. After combing the area, I was able to find a wig in a Halloween costume box. Hopefully it isn't a family heirloom. I cut the wig down, dipped it in some paint, and then hot glued it into place. We ended up just spray painting all the raffia grass to get the color red we wanted, and then it was all a little bit long, so Gina just told me to cut the grass, but I just really wasn't motivated. To mount this stuff to the wall, I just drilled a couple holes for finish nails. I used some rebar wire, and I have this lag bolt with a washer. But wait, there's myrrh. Don't click off just yet. You'll be sorry. Slay what? We made a holiday overlay too? Thanks for watching. Be sure to click like, subscribe, click the bell, write us in your will, or leave us a funny pun in the comments below. Now go click on another one of our videos.